Hey, welcome to Pop Culture Maniacs podcast. This week, your host is me, Kieran Freemantle, and the TV editor from the website, Henegan. This week, we'll be talking about the future of cinema. We've seen that it's obviously a big topic issue at the moment, so I may as well start with me. I'm a big cinema addict. It's probably my happy place and one of the few things that gives me any sense of a social life. So I'm going to be biased and say I want cinemas to survive. Jean, anything you want to start with? Any initial thoughts?
I'm going to completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I haven't been as big of a cinema person as of late, but in the last couple of years with Movie Pass and the Regal Cinema Pass, I've found myself going quite frequently.
Yeah.
Cinemas, and like it really kind of hit home on Christmas watching Wonder Woman on the TV and thinking this could have been so much more engaging and fun to watch in a theater. And I felt really for the first time like this missing that communal experience of seeing huge moments with superheroes and crazy stuff on screen while everyone clapped and cheered together.
Exactly. Yes, it's even with when going into the cinemas over here, it doesn't have quite that same energy, since at best they've got half capacity, and due to COVID, not so many big releases have been done, and you got this with cinemas at the moment. You've got the double factor of COVID causing the fear, because obviously people don't want to get infected, and the obvious lack of releases. So when the UK, by the time of the second lockdown, there were not many new releases anyway that interested people.
And I think kind of the main question everyone seems to have is, can the streaming experience at home replace the theatrical experience for the majority of people? And I mean, obviously there's going to be pockets where it's always going to be easier for them to watch a streaming release than it is to go to the theater and watch a theatrical release. But the more I think about it, the more I can't see all the theaters disappearing and theatrical release not being a thing anymore. Now, do I think we might end up with more streaming releases for smaller films that aren't going to generate as much money? Possibly. I think a lot of the art housey Oscar type films might be more might do better with streaming releases in the future, and might only get smaller and smaller theatrical releases. But I find myself strangely confident, which I wasn't back in the summer. I was much more pessimistic about theaters, but I find myself more and more confident that there's going to be theaters when this is all said and done. I suspect things will be different in ways that we can't even grasp yet, but I think there's still going to be that need for a communal theatrical experience.
Yeah, I think when you look at the history of cinema, it's always adapted, because the death of cinemas has been predicted many times before. 50s, it was cinema was seen in trouble because of the rise of TV. So they the way they counted it was that we got more big epics. That was sort of like the era of like the Sword and Sandals, the biblical epics, and all those sort of films, right? Technicolor stuff. Again, around rise of VHS video, cinemas were seen to be endangered then, and plus cinemas in the 70s had a sort of not so great reputation because they were seen as quite cheap and grotty. But then that led to the 80s. We had obviously more blockbusters. Plus we had the rise of the multiplexes. And so I think there are many ways it can go. Obviously, I think when people say they want everything should be out on streaming, and I really think people should be careful what you wish for, because streaming services are going to end up pushing up their prices. The market as it is, it's unsustainable. I think because like Disney Plus are set to raise their prices in the new year, well, later this year. Plus, and there are sort of various models. I think in the UK we have Odeon and Cineworld have the they pretty much have their subscription service of their own. We pay for a limitless card for $17.99. Go and watch as many films as you want. Go to see a film about two or three films a month. Not a bad deal, actually. There's also been, like in the UK, you had like the sort of rise of the boutique cinemas. So there's one near me called in Bath, the let me get this right, the Trevoni cinema, which is it sort of marks itself as a big upmarket experience. So you've got a nice cafe, bar, comfy seats, smaller, not as much seating, but you're paying for the luxury. Plus, for cinemas near me, you got the Watershed in Bristol, famous for obviously a cinema, but it's also a bar and the community hub for filmmakers. And the Little Theatres in Bath is very popular because it's obviously it's got history, lots of community around it, and a very devoted patronage. So yeah, cinema will adapt in some form. How it will be, we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing for me will be seeing how Hollywood and I guess really it's mostly Hollywood will adapt its type of releases for whatever cinemas kind of turn out to be. Because already we have so many huge tentpole films as kind of the only thing holding up the industry, or at least that's what people have been saying for years. We only have these tentpole superhero movies, Star Wars movies, holding up the industry. Will this continue? Will it become worse because cinemas need those kind of big budget, get butts in the seats films to sustain them? Or will we see something that kind of brings more balance to the types of releases we're seeing from Hollywood?
I certainly hope for more balance. I think, again, this sort of rush for tentpoles is unsustainable in the long term, and it really makes cinema pretty bland if it's just all Marvel films, DC films, Star Wars, or whatever. And plus, particularly we got at the moment, the current situation in cinema is you got Disney domination. I think wasn't it like 5 or 7 films of the top grossing films last year were all Disney films. So it's near a monopoly at the moment for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with the news that all the Warner Brothers films are going to be joint release this coming year, and Disney obviously has not made that announcement with their films. It's going to be interesting to see if Disney keeps that monopoly despite the lower box office, which is expected with all the COVID again this year, or if Warner Brothers somehow manages to pull ahead by, I don't know, getting more subscribers to HBO Max here in the States, or I don't know how they're going to go about converting that into profit, but it'll be interesting to see how that works out for them.
Yeah. With HBO Max, though, it's only operating in the United States because HBO has a lot of deals with other broadcasters abroad. So, like Wonder Woman over here was pretty much a theatrical release, though they are moving the VOD release a bit earlier because obviously the rising COVID numbers. But that sort of then leads to another issue with HBO's decision, piracy, because it's going to be a lot easier for people just when it's released on a film's released online for them just pirate and go onto less reputable websites.
Or even just, on a Zoom call with friends, just have everybody watch the movie together. Like, you can knock out 12, 13, 14 people on one single watch like that.
Yeah, so not so profitable, because this year, well, sorry, we're recording this on New Year's Day, so I'm going to slip up a few times here. Last year, apparently China overtook American box office for the first time. I think for pretty obvious reasons, but it does lead to the question: is Hollywood going to end up being more focused, especially for theatrical films, if they're going to be more focused on the international box office, especially if America's becoming more streaming minded?
Yeah, that's absolutely a great point. And I think, I mean, I'd be shocked if it didn't become much more international box office focused. You know, just from talking to people I know here, so few people have the time or energy or money to go see movies here, outside of those who have the multi-pass systems with a given theater. I don't know a lot of people who go to the theater unless it's, you know, something to the extent of, you know, Avengers Endgame, where everybody has to go see it, or Star Wars, or everybody has to go see it. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing a greater focus on international box office, particularly China and Asia, and then seeing that factor into film production as well.
Because there's already been that Chinese influence, since especially since the 2010s, since lots of Chinese companies have invested in Hollywood. I think we've all probably seen at some point Chinese company names at the beginning of a film. Obviously, Chinese actors coming over to have roles in American films, like Iron Man 3 had an added scene for Chinese audiences. Get some, hire a Chinese star or two just to appear in your blockbuster. And obviously, some Hollywood stars have gone to China for a quick payday as well for a film. Also, like thinking something like Midway, the 2019 film about the Battle of Midway. You can tell that the Chinese influence on that was they had shoe in the Doolittle raids, because obviously the American pilots had to land in China after they did their mission.
And I think we're even starting to see that creep into television as well. The big news over the holiday was the new Benioff and Weiss, the two guys behind Game of Thrones. Their new big epic TV show is going to be based on a series of Chinese stories.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so I think, of course, it was in the news for a very depressingly sad reason that one of the writers was murdered. But it's going to be interesting to see how that begins to impact television production as well.
Yeah, exactly. Though on the other side, because obviously American and Chinese relations are a lot more frosty, going to be a lot more frosty as well. So whether it's going to be as easy for Chinese companies to invest in America, it's going to be another issue. And particularly with China, they're very nationalistic with foreign media that is released here. Hence why Hollywood encouraged Chinese companies to invest, to circumvent the rules, bring in some Chinese stars or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, from an American perspective, that's going to be an interesting tightrope to walk, because, you know, I don't foresee, you know, politically us shutting down relations with China or anything that crazy, but I think there's definitely national distrust I'd say, of China, and there's definitely some issues there that I think Hollywood's going to have to be cognizant of moving forward beyond simply the business aspect of it all.
Yeah. So going back to the HBO Max deal as well, because obviously that rose a lot of controversy with filmmakers and even production companies, because Legendary Pictures were very upset by the lack of announcement. they were trying to sell Godzilla versus King Kong to Netflix, and Warner Brothers blocked it. The recent news is they've been able to get 250 million from Warner Brothers so that they can release Godzilla versus King Kong on HBO Max, and June is getting a solely theatrical release because it's turned out to be a much more expensive decision than Warner Brothers just simply announcing it and magically thinking it's all gonna pan out for them.
Yeah, that was the thing that really shocked me, is that nobody sat down and ran the numbers and figured out the percentages and took into account like you have to pay them, like you have deals in place, you have to pay them to change things up. And I'm hopeful that by the time Dune comes out, things will be significantly better. We'll be able to go to the theater and not be super worried, because I really think Dune deserves a big screen release. I mean, that's the kind of movie you need to be able to sit in a theater and see it, a story high, watch all that. It's going to be incredible to watch it. But it boggled my mind to hear that they hadn't taken into account the back end payments and everything they needed to give these studios and actors and directors. Like, come on, guys, you're not Bush League, you're Warner Brothers. You need to figure this out.
Plus, I was after the announcement, was it the director of Dune, Denise, Villanova, is it? You pronounce it? I'm not sure.
I think it's Villeneuve, maybe.
Yeah, French Canadian bloke, so I'm sure any French speakers will correct us. So please do, because he wrote for Variety about the move and sort of his dissatisfaction. Obviously, he was pretty much saying like this is not a sort of good move for the consumer. This is just a move for the bottom line for AT&T to make more money. You use their films to boost HBO's Max's subscription numbers.
And as an HBO Max subscriber who didn't have access via Roku, I will say I am thankful that this somehow got the deal with Roku done. But I completely agree. Like, it was all about getting subscribers to HBO Max here in the States. It was all about that extra bottom line money, and they really weren't thinking beyond that.
And it sort of goes back to my previous point. Like, the HBO decision was just so American centric. They completely ignored the rest of the world, because cinema, obviously, it's not just America.
Yeah, and the bulk of the box office is clearly not coming from America, especially not now. So they really should have put more thought into it and looked at it beyond just a band-aid to placate American audiences.
Yeah. As also, I think with cinemas as well, the audience might change. I think getting over the 2010s within the UK, we've had the rise of sort of the grey audience. So there's been lots of films sort of more marketed for that audience. So, get some older stars, sort of, and get them in a nice sort of rock, comedy drama or something. I have been to quite a few of those sort of films, which not necessarily are catered for me. I think it's starting to creep in a bit more in America as well, because I think wasn't it a couple of years ago you had Book Club, which had a load of aging stars in that, like Diane Keaton, Andy Garcia.
Yeah, I mean, there really is this untapped audience that I think studios with mid-market range films have been missing. And you can get everybody across the board with a Star Wars film, but you could also get the baby boomer generation was the largest generation, so why not market films for the men of that generation with kind of like their stars they loved, or the women in the generation with a movie like Book Club. You can make money, you'll get people to go see it. You should not leave those paying customers out just because you want to churn out another Batman series.
Yeah, exactly. It does lead to because obviously with the streaming boom, it's, shall we say, been quite probably more beneficial for families, and I think for me, it's actually quite nice for when you go to see a film when there aren't kids sort of going around screaming or whatever. But it does lead to the question, if they're sort of more going to be more focused for the home experience, but when are they going to get that love for cinema like a lot of other people would have?
That's a great question. Just how attuned the younger generation seem to be to technology and making it work for them whenever they need it. That's the thing that I think Hollywood needs to get on right now and figure it out, because there's a very good chance that the concept of sitting in a dark theater with a bunch of people and just watching a film is going to be difficult to maintain, because I mean, we've already seen it with everyone pulling out their cell phones and texting and talking and all that, and that wasn't there 20 years ago when we didn't have cell phones. So it's already changed the way movie experience is. But the question is, how much further will new technology do that? Are there going to be kids who don't care about that, who think that's just a normal part of going to the movies, so they don't mind? Or is it going to start alienating older audiences who don't want to see that? So there's a balance that needs to be struck, and I'm not sure how Hollywood can do it, but they got to start figuring it out.
Really, it was an advert for I think it was for Orange in the UK because they did like the 2-for-1 movie deals in the past. One of them is that they have pretty much like airport style security for people going into the cinemas to make sure they didn't use their phones. And you're thinking, way I actually wish they did do that. Sort of like send in sniffer dogs, get having everything X-rayed and all that. Like, it makes the experience nicer for me.
Yeah, I mean, and I like the Alamo Drafthouse chain here in the States is famous for, if you pull out a phone during the movie, you're immediately kicked out. Like, that's just how it goes. Yeah. And it's wonderful because everyone's focused on the film, and you don't have to worry about someone pulling out their phone, talking to their girlfriend, sending a FaceTime, which distracts from everybody.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking, if you're spending this money, why whip out your phone anyway?
Exactly. Just stay home. It's not that hard.
And then there was a thing we talked about it already with the energy of the cinemas, and I've had some pretty good experiences with with quite a few films. Obviously, the films I've ever experienced an audience clap was The Hunger Games, which I saw in America, and within the UK it was Les Miserables, because obviously not musical fans, and Bohemian Rhapsody. So it is quite fun when you have that sort of reaction. I remember like something like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the sort of sheer shock where everyone had when Caesar spoke. Or even one fun experience was I didn't like Paranormal Activity, but when one young woman shouted, "Oh dear God!" or something like that, and everyone just laughed when they heard that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the best ones I've had. Mostly it's in superhero movies, like in what is it, in Infinity War, when they all started disappearing. People literally just started yelling in the theater because they were just absolutely distraught and shocked, and it was actual adults just yelling out of their fear. And when Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi disappeared at the end and had the battle with Kylo Ren, and then just disappeared, people like applauded, like things like that, just huge big moments. And when I was watching Wonder Woman with my family over Christmas, when the invisible jet happened, I just knew that if I'd been in a theater, people would have just gasped or laughed, or they would have had some reaction to it because it's such an iconic moment for the character. But the five of us just sitting in the living room were just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, visible jet. That's a fun joke. So it just felt like it didn't feel the same as it would have, you know. Oh, I guess the biggest reaction in the past year was seeing Cats uh, in a theater, where I'd say 95% of us were seeing it ironically. But yeah, I mean, just the laughter, the jokes, just people having so much fun with strangers, all reacting to the ridiculousness that we're watching on screen. That's the kind of thing I really miss, not having cinemas open here.
Yeah, I was going to a good point with like midnight screenings, because for people with, you get the right maniacs going and joining, and you obviously like Room's famous for all the midnight screenings because people dress up, throw American footballs, quote the lines, throw spoons at the screen because of or something like Battle Royale. People dress up like the kids in that film as well. So
Yeah, we did that with Rocky Horror Picture Show here.
yeah, that one's like, isn't that like one of the few films that's pretty much never gone out of theaters? Or yeah,
Yep, it's always running somewhere.
yeah. And also, I was going to say, uh, with a lot of filmmakers, and I've talked about the point before in the previous podcast, but many of them, they want their films to be seen on the big screen. They make it for the big screen. They don't want, because not many people can afford like a $10,000 massive TV with the several thousand sound systems, have your own mini cinema. Most people don't have that luxury. So it's the best way to see it in its intended medium.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always an advocate of I want to see it the way the creator intended. And, watching it on my TV is not how Patty Jenkins intended for me to watch Wonder Woman. It's not how Pete Doctor wanted me to watch Soul. It was fine. It worked. I saw it, but it certainly missed something on the translation from the big screen to the small screen.
Yeah, I think that's the maybe one of the other ways for smaller companies that they might, because with the rise of Netflix, what they offer is a lot of creative freedom for directors. So like people like what's his name, Duncan Jones, Martin Scorsese, or whatever. A lot of them, obviously, that was one of the big draws for them to work with. And I'm just wondering if maybe the rise of smaller films could happen again if, say, the smaller production companies maybe offer a bit more creative freedom, even if they aren't able to offer as much pay for people. They can at least make it out with creative freedom, less studio interference.
Yeah, it could be something like the Blumhouse model,
Yeah.
which has been incredibly successful with having nobody take as much up front, but you get the creativity to make the film you want to make, and the money comes on the back end of the receipts. So everyone gets paid if the film does well, so you have the incentive to do really good, interesting work that people are going to enjoy.
And obviously that's how Hollywood used to operate. Well, I think it still does. One of the draws, you might have an actor may take say several million up front, and then they also get say 10% of the gross. Like Alec Guinness, he wasn't it when he was in Star Wars, he was smart enough that he got about something like 2% of the gross. So yeah, he was minted for the rest of his life.
He was a smart man.
Yeah. And obviously, if everything goes to streaming, actors, directors, or whatever, don't have that option.
Yeah, I mean that was the big issue with Tenet, was that all the money was going to be on the back end for him, and that's why he was so insistent it had to be released in theaters, and it just did not work at all.
Yeah, I like Tenet a lot, but yeah, I think it probably would have been best just to wait till next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's at that point there was no reason to release it if you desperately needed the money in the box office, because I once movie theaters are open and things are significantly safer for us to go to them, people are gonna, it's gonna be the same thing with people flocking to vacations. And, for a couple months, everyone's gonna want to do the things they couldn't do. And people are gonna flock to those movie theaters and watch movies. So that would be the perfect time to release something like that.
Yeah. And yeah, that's sort of like a similar argument, because I was speaking with my brother the other day, and he pretty much said the same thing as you just did. And I'm sort of, to me, so I still see cinema as sort of like the equivalent of like live sport, like theatre, concerts and gigs or whatever. And no one's sort of cool. You could easily say you can watch a play on TV, you can watch sports on TV. Yeah, no one's calling for an end to that. So why end to any of those sort of things? Why do you want an end to cinemas then?
Exactly. And as I think we've decided in this podcast, there's not going to be an end to cinema. There's going to be changes and things will be different, but this isn't the death knell for cinema that everyone seemed to think it would be when this all started.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of companies need to be should not make any short-term decisions, because No Time to Die, the next Bond film, there was talk that because MGM was so desperate for money that they were prepared to sell it for 600 million to either Netflix or Apple. But I think for the long term, that could have damaged the Bond brand, because there's a prestige with your films released in cinemas. If you released it on a streaming service, people would think, well, when you release the next film, thinking, why would we go to the cinema if you already released it straight to streaming the last time round?
Exactly. And I think that's the large part of thinking behind why all the Marvel films that were supposed to have come out have not been released on streaming, is because Disney knows that and wants to keep that to be a specific theatrical experience. You go to the theater to see the superheroes, which is the one thing that does worry me about Warner Brothers dropping Wonder Woman 84 on streaming. Does that cheapen the brand, or is that, something that might hurt them in the long run? Because, the next, gosh, I don't even know what, Suicide Squad?
The Suicide Squad.
Yeah, so why would you go see that in the theater? I mean, has less famous superheroes in it than Wonder Woman. So why is that a theatrical event when Wonder Woman wasn't? So that becomes kind of a question people are going to start asking.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. So yeah, that covers everything. So to our listeners, thank you very much. If you enjoyed what you listened to, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or whatever your social media of choice is. We'll speak to you again soon. Cheers. Bye.